The desert does not care who you are. It does not care where you come from, what you believe, or how badly you want to survive. It does not care about lineage or morality or intention. The desert only recognizes motion, dominance, and adaptation. Everything else is stripped away. This is the quiet truth that connects Dune, Part 2 and Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Both films place their characters inside worlds that are not simply dangerous, but actively hostile to individuality. Worlds that do not just threaten to kill you, but threaten to erase you. Worlds where survival is not about winning, but about becoming something unrecognizable in order to endure. On Arrakis, survival is wrapped in ritual and belief. On the wasteland, survival is stripped down to violence and speed. Yet both worlds operate on the same principle. They reward those who adapt to the system, and they punish those who try to exist outside of it. Arrakis is a planet that has turned suffering into structure. Every resource is controlled. Every movement is observed. Every life is measured against utility. Water determines your social value. Spice determines your political importance. Belief determines whether your death will matter or disappear into the sand. Nothing on Arrakis is allowed to be meaningless. Even pain must serve a purpose. This is how the planet maintains control. It convinces its people that endurance is noble, that hierarchy is natural, and that sacrifice is not only necessary, but sacred. The desert does not merely kill. It convinces you that it has the right to. The wasteland offers no such comfort. There is no narrative here to explain suffering, no prophecy to justify loss, no tradition to soften brutality. The wasteland is raw, exposed, and relentlessly practical. Fuel is life. Water is leverage. Bodies are assets. Movement is survival. Nothing stays long enough to become holy. Nothing lasts long enough to become tradition. Where Arrakis teaches people who they are meant to be, the wasteland removes the question entirely. It does not ask who you are. It asks whether you can keep going. These environments are not backgrounds. They are machines, and machines do not care who they destroy. Paul Atreides arrives on Arrakis carrying grief, fear, and something far more volatile than ambition: expectation. The Fremen do not see Paul as a refugee from a fallen house. They do not see a young man struggling to adapt to an unforgiving planet. They see confirmation, proof that their suffering was not random, evidence that their history was always moving toward this moment. Paul does not invent the prophecy. He inherits it, and inheritance is heavier than choice. At first, Paul believes he can walk the line carefully. He believes he can accept the Fremen's belief without becoming consumed by it. He believes he can use the myth strategically, guiding events away from catastrophe while still protecting the people who now depend on him. But belief does not exist in moderation. It spreads. It amplifies. It demands fulfillment. Every survival becomes a miracle. Every coincidence becomes destiny. Every victory becomes proof that the prophecy is real. And the more people believe, the less Paul is allowed to simply exist. Paul understands exactly what is happening. He understands that faith is more powerful than violence, because faith does not need orders. Once people believe in you, they will act on your behalf without instruction. They will kill for you. They will die for you. And they will do it willingly, convinced that their suffering serves a greater purpose. This is the quiet horror at the center of Paul's rise. He sees the future clearly enough to know where it leads. He sees the holy war spreading across the galaxy. He sees entire worlds burned in his name. He sees his own image transformed into a symbol that justifies endless violence. And yet, the path forward continues to narrow. Because belief does not belong to the one it elevates. It belongs to the people who need it. The Fremen need Paul to be real. They need him to be inevitable. They need him to be more than human. If Paul refuses the role, he does not dismantle the myth. He collapses the structure holding their hope together. Refusal would not stop the violence. It would simply remove the only figure capable of directing it. So Paul steps forward, not because he desires power, but because power has already been placed on him. Not because he wants to rule, but because the alternative is chaos without meaning. The more Paul accepts his role, the less space he has to remain himself. Every action becomes symbolic. Every word is interpreted. Even restraint becomes strategy. Even mercy becomes manipulation. Paul's power grows, but his freedom dissolves. The more he is worshipped, the less he is seen as human. The more inevitable he becomes, the less capable he is of choosing otherwise. By the time Paul fully embraces his destiny, the choice is already gone. He does not step into the future. The future closes around him. While Paul is being lifted higher by belief, another child is being dragged downward by power. Furiosa's story begins without witnesses, without ceremony, without meaning. She is not chosen. She is taken. Her world does not pause to explain itself to her. It does not offer symbolism or destiny. It offers only force. She is stolen from her home, ripped from familiarity, and thrown into a system that sees bodies as resources. Her name is stripped away. Her future is rewritten without her consent. In the wasteland, identity is not something you discover. It is something you lose. Power here is not spiritual. It is industrial. Immortan Joe does not rule because people believe in him. He rules because he controls access. Access to water. Access to fuel. Access to reproduction. Survival is not a right. It is permission granted selectively and revoked without warning. This is the fundamental difference between the wasteland and Arrakis. Arrakis convinces people that suffering is sacred. The wasteland makes no such claim. It is honest in its cruelty. It does not disguise exploitation as destiny. It simply enforces it. Furiosa learns early that resistance does not look like rebellion. Rebellion gets you killed. Resistance looks like adaptation without surrender. It looks like becoming invisible. It looks like surviving without accepting the lie that this is all you are worth. She learns when to speak and when silence is safer. She learns when obedience is tactical and when it is surrender. She learns how to endure without letting the system rewrite her sense of self. Where Paul grows into a role that expands endlessly around him, Furiosa is compressed, pressed inward, reduced. The system does not want her to become more. It wants her to function. This is where her strength forms, not in dominance, not in control, but in refusal. A refusal to internalize the identity forced onto her. A refusal to believe that survival requires submission of the self. A refusal to disappear completely. Paul's power grows because others project meaning onto him. Furiosa's power grows because she refuses meaning imposed from above. She does not seek followers. She does not seek worship. She does not seek to rule the wasteland. She seeks an exit. And in a world designed to trap people, the desire to leave is radical. The contrast between these two paths reveals how differently power can shape a person. Paul is elevated until he can no longer touch the ground. Furiosa is crushed until she learns how to move through the cracks. Violence in these worlds reinforces that difference. On Arrakis, violence is framed. It is ritualized, observed, formal. Duels follow rules. Deaths carry symbolism. War is narrated as history unfolding rather than brutality occurring. This framing creates distance. Violence feels inevitable, and inevitability is comforting. If something must happen, no one needs to take responsibility for it. Paul does not command genocide. The idea of Paul does. The myth acts on his behalf, justifying destruction without ever requiring him to give the order. In the wasteland, violence is immediate. There is no ceremony, no distance, no illusion of inevitability. Every act of violence is felt in the body. Every crash leaves scars. Every wound slows someone down. Violence is not destiny. It is damage. The wasteland does not justify brutality. It normalizes it. Violence is treated as a currency, exchanged constantly, without pretense. Both systems produce suffering, but they do so differently. One hides it behind meaning. The other exposes it without apology. Paul's tragedy deepens as his foresight sharpens. At first, the ability to see the future feels like control. Knowledge becomes leverage. Vision becomes power. Paul believes that by understanding what is coming, he can guide events toward the least destructive outcome. But foresight does not create freedom. It removes uncertainty. And uncertainty is where choice lives. The clearer the future becomes, the fewer paths remain open. Every possible future Paul sees leads to violence. Every attempt to avoid catastrophe only shifts it, reshapes it, delays it. Paul is not corrupted by power. He is imprisoned by inevitability. The universe does not allow him to fail. Failure would destabilize belief itself. If Paul stumbles, the myth fractures. If the myth fractures, the system collapses. And collapse means chaos without purpose. So Paul becomes necessary. And necessity is more dangerous than tyranny. A tyrant can be resisted. A necessity cannot. Paul is no longer allowed to be wrong. He is no longer allowed to hesitate. He is no longer allowed to walk away. His humanity becomes a liability, something that must be sacrificed to preserve the structure built around him. While Paul is losing the ability to choose, Furiosa is slowly reclaiming it. Her journey is not about ascent. It is about reclamation. Each act of resistance restores something taken from her. A memory, a name, a sense of direction. Her body becomes a record of every decision she makes. Scars replace speeches. Pain replaces prophecy. But unlike Paul, her suffering does not erase her identity. It preserves it. The system wants her to become an object. She refuses. Quietly, persistently, relentlessly. She does not become a symbol for others to follow. She becomes someone capable of choosing again. This is the emotional fault line between these stories. Paul gains power and loses agency. Furiosa loses everything and protects her agency at all costs. As Paul's power solidifies, something irreversible happens. The future stops feeling like a warning and starts feeling like an obligation. The visions no longer show him possibilities. They show him expectations. Each path forward is already crowded with belief, already shaped by the people who need him to exist in a specific way. Paul no longer asks what he wants. He asks what must happen. This is the final transformation, not from man to ruler, but from person to function. Paul becomes the mechanism through which history moves. His individuality dissolves into inevitability. The myth no longer serves him. He serves the myth. Even his compassion becomes constrained. Mercy risks destabilizing belief. Doubt risks weakening resolve. Love risks humanizing a figure that must remain symbolic. Every human impulse becomes a threat to the structure built around him. Paul is not worshipped despite his fear. He is worshipped because of it. His hesitation makes him seem thoughtful. His restraint makes him seem wise. His suffering becomes proof of righteousness. And so the system absorbs everything he is. The tragedy of Paul Atreides is not that he fails to stop the future. It is that the future does not require his consent. By the end of his journey, Paul stands at the center of an empire forged from belief and blood. He commands unimaginable power, yet possesses less personal freedom than he did when he was powerless. His life no longer belongs to him. It belongs to the idea that outgrew him. Where Paul's story is about becoming unavoidable, Furiosa's is about becoming unreachable. Her survival does not depend on controlling the wasteland. It depends on refusing to let the wasteland define her. She never tries to dominate the system that hurt her. She understands that domination would require becoming part of it. Instead, she chooses movement over ownership, direction over control, escape over conquest. Her resistance is not loud. It is not theatrical. It is persistent. The wasteland tries to reduce her to utility at every turn. A body to be used, a tool to be exploited, a resource to be managed. Each time, Furiosa pushes back just enough to preserve herself, not enough to draw attention, not enough to be destroyed. She learns that survival is not about winning. It is about remaining intact. While Paul's journey strips him of the ability to define himself, Furiosa's restores it piece by piece. She remembers who she was before the wasteland claimed her. She carries that memory forward, even when the world around her insists it is meaningless. Pain does not elevate her. It sharpens her. Loss does not hollow her out. It clarifies what matters. This is why Furiosa never becomes a symbol. Symbols require abstraction. Furiosa remains stubbornly physical. Her story is written on her body, not projected onto others. She bleeds. She limps. She persists. Both films ultimately dismantle the fantasy that control equals safety. Paul controls armies, yet cannot control the consequences of belief. Furiosa controls almost nothing, yet preserves her autonomy by refusing to surrender her sense of self. Power does not save either of them. It only reshapes their suffering. Paul's suffering is quiet, internal, and isolating. It grows as his influence expands. Furiosa's suffering is loud, physical, and immediate. It lessens only when she escapes the structures that enforce it. Dune warns us about revolutions built on belief, how easily liberation transforms into domination, how hope becomes justification, how suffering becomes acceptable when it is framed as necessary. Furiosa warns us about systems that reduce people to resources, how order becomes ownership, how survival itself becomes exploitation, how efficiency erases humanity. Neither story offers comfort. Neither suggests that endurance leads to peace. Both reject the idea that suffering is ennobling. What they offer instead is clarity. They show us that systems survive by convincing people to sacrifice themselves. That power often requires the erasure of individuality. That meaning, when imposed from above, can be just as destructive as chaos. By the end of Paul's journey, the universe bends around him. Worlds fall. Armies kneel. History reshapes itself in his image. And yet, Paul is smaller than ever. He cannot step away. He cannot undo what has begun. He cannot reclaim the person he was before belief turned him into a symbol. He has become a god. And gods do not get to be human. By the end of Furiosa's journey, nothing is guaranteed. The world remains broken. Violence still exists. Survival is still uncertain. But her choices belong to her again. She does not rule. She does not conquer. She does not reshape the world. She escapes it. And in a system designed to consume people, escape is victory. One story ends with ascension and entrapment. The other ends with survival and autonomy. One becomes divine and loses the future. The other rejects divinity and keeps the ability to choose. Two deserts, two answers, one truth. In worlds designed to erase you, survival always demands a price. And the most dangerous thing you can lose is not your life. It is the right to decide who you are.